The jewelry styles that will increase in value over the next 5 years. Who knows? It could be even the next 10 years. That's what we're going to dive into today, jewelry friends. I had a question about this, and I don't remember the exact question, but it was something along the lines of, can I do a podcast episode about what types of jewelry I should be looking for long term, right? Sometimes as jewelry resellers, we can't only think from the perspective of an entrepreneur, but sometimes we have to think about long term investments. Maybe we even have to be psychic if we're going to figure this stuff out. But today I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you get really, really specific about what types of jewelry you want to buy now because the value and the demand is only going to increase. Now, this is something that I have been researching the past few days, and I think this is going to be very, very helpful if you're looking to get a little bit more strategic and a little bit more dialed in as it relates to your sourcing. All right. And I think this is going to help you make more money long term. So, this is an episode you don't want to miss. I'm going to give you as much detailed information as I possibly can. And if you have anything to add, please do so in the comments. But before we get to that, jewelry friends, hello, my name is Desiree, and you know that I am your jewelry reselling bestie. And I come to you every week with information that I think is going to be helpful for those of us who resell jewelry, even if you don't resell jewelry, if you just love jewelry, you collect jewelry, or maybe you have your own jewelry store, or your own website, whatever the case may be, we're all about the jewelry here. And I am so thrilled to be doing a deep dive on this topic today. All right, so before we get into that, I like to remind you to check out our websites, jewelryresellerspodcast.com, because over there you can find anything you need as it relates to the podcast, and also goodgreatfabulous.com. I have some things for sale over there. I also have some ebooks and e-guides for you. So if you're curious, you may want to take a little look-see and see if there's anything there that may suit your fancy. All right. So let's go ahead and get into today's topic. Like I said, we're going to talk about the jewelry styles that I believe are going to increase in value over the next 5 to 10 years. Now, jewelry has been a certain type of investment for some people. Right now, I'm not going to say that I believe jewelry should be an investment vehicle for long term growth as it relates to money, as it relates to value, because I don't have any experience with that. But I can speak from the perspective as someone who has been reselling jewelry for years. And I've seen trends come and go. I've seen demands go up and down as it relates to specific types of jewelry. And so, what I want to do is give you some of the things or some of the brands, even that I believe are going to, like I said, be in demand because we are starting to notice the jewelry buyer is a lot more sophisticated. Whether that be, the younger generation or someone who's a little bit more seasoned, I think that we are becoming more strategic as it relates to our purchases. And the other thing that I recently read an article about this too, where people who have the money to spend are investing in jewelry instead of luxury items like handbags, clothing, that type of thing. And the other thing that was really interesting is because we are going through a little bit of an economic uncertainty, people don't want to waste money on junk jewelry. They would rather spend their money, even if it's going to be a little bit more, higher end, maybe a little bit more expensive, on something that's going to last, something that's going to sustain the test of time, and something that's going to be just as valuable and just as stylish as it is now in years to come. All right. So it's kind of counterintuitive because you would think, well, if everybody is stressing about money, they're going to buy the cheap junk jewelry. But it's actually the opposite. People want their money to be more or I should say they're spending, to be more intentional. They don't want to waste money on something that's cheap, something that's going to fall apart, or something that they can only get one or two wears out of. All right, so you may want to take notes on this particular episode. I am going to be throwing some graphics on the screen for those of you who are watching the video version of the podcast. And then if you're listening to the audio version, I'm going to read some of these brand names and styles so that way, as you're listening, you can get an idea of what you want to look for and the types of inventory pieces you want to source or invest in. Okay? So remember, not all jewelry holds value, but some styles are definitely on the rise. And these pieces and brands and designers that I'm going to share with you today are definitely, I mean, they're in demand now and they're becoming more popular. And I think they're just going to continue to be more popular as people learn about jewelry and as people become more and more passionate and excited about jewelry. All right. So we want to invest in these pieces if we can, because I truly believe that as the years go on, these particular brands and styles may be harder to find. And we're talking about authentic jewelry pieces. We're not talking about reproductions. We're not talking about cheap knockoffs. We're talking about authentic, original jewelry pieces. All right. So let's go ahead and get right into it. The number one jewelry style that I think is going to increase in value and demand in years to come are signed costume jewelry pieces from the 1980s and the 1990s. Now, we have seen this steadily increase ever since, I want to say, at least 2 years ago. 90s jewelry has always been popular. And I think a lot of people, especially the younger generation, are really getting excited about some of these pieces and some of the styles, right? Because it really taps into that the whole TikTok trend. I saw this where a girl was wearing like a total 80s outfit and it was just adorable. And she even had the jewelry and the hair and everything. So I don't think that this particular trend is going away. I think it's just going to get more and more popular, especially with Gen Z and millennials. You know, they love that retro, oversized, logo heavy design type stuff. Also, there's a lot of collectors who want vintage pieces and not the cheap, fast fashion stuff. We're talking about the stuff that maybe our mothers wore, maybe our grandmothers wore, depending on what your age is. All right. So, what do we want to look for? Now, this is some of these brands I think a lot of you already know, and some of it you may not know. All right, so we're talking Monet, Napier, Givenchy, and Klein is also on this list. Now, not all Anne Klein is good, but I have sold some of the real bold, chunky lion head motif statement necklaces. People love those. But some of her more basic stuff is not as in demand. So, as it relates to Anne Klein, you want that big lion head style. All right. Also, Kenneth J. Lane, Signer, I think I'm pronouncing that right. Swarovski, especially the 80s rhinestones. Trifari, of course, always on the list. Christian Dior, Joan Rivers, Nolan Miller. I love Nolan Miller stuff. And Irwin Pearl, oversized 80s gold tone. I don't know if I've ever sold any Irwin Pearl, but that's a brand I need to study a little bit more. However, when I was doing my research, it definitely came up as one of the brands to watch for signed costume jewelry from the 80s and the 90s. All right, so make sure you pay attention to that. All right, so next up on my list is sterling silver statement jewelry. Now, I've talked about this in previous episodes that sterling silver jewelry is always in demand. It never goes out of style, and it tends to be more affordable than gold. So, a lot of people will spend the money on sterling silver pieces. All right, the more you learn about silver, the better off you're going to be, especially when you're outsourcing or when you're recognizing Well, it will help you recognize the sterling silver pieces. All right, so let's talk about why sterling silver will increase in value and increase in demand as the years go on. The first thing I have in my notes here is silver is undervalued compared to gold. All right, investors and collectors are shifting their focus. I mean, not that I'm saying gold is not is not sought after. Of course, it is, but silver tends to be a little bit more accessible, and it seems to be more people have silver than they do gold, at least in their personal jewelry collections. All right, so a lot of investors and collectors are shifting their focus to silver. All right, and this has been a trend that has been going on since before the pandemic. The large silver pieces. Now we're talking about Taxco, Native American, artisan jewelry pieces are no longer being produced in volume quantities. So again, this is something that is going to drive the value up, and it is going to increase the demand. So if you have any of these silver pieces, don't worry. They're always going to be collectible, and there's always going to be somebody looking for that. Okay? So we have designers like Yerman, Hardy, and Lagos are building cult resale markets. All right, these particular designers have huge loyal buyer base. All right, so if you find any of those pieces, make sure that you hold on to them. I mean, unless you're trying to sell them right away. So let's talk about what we want to buy or some of the brands we want to look out for as it relates to sterling silver statement jewelry. All right, so George Jensen, this is a Scandinavian silversmith, I think. James Avery, David Yerman, like I said, sterling and 14K as it relates to Yerman. John Hardy, woven Bali silver, very beautiful. Lagos, Judith Ripka, I've talked about her. Carolyn Polak, this is a Southwest sterling brand. Also, Native American silver, Native American silver jewelry. I mean, man, there's so many people who are looking for that stuff, and when they have it, they just wear it. They wear it all right, so Native American, Zuni, Navajo, Hopi, I think I'm pronouncing that right. Is it Hopi jewelry, especially turquoise and squash blossoms, right? That's interesting, something to learn more about. I already talked about this too. Taxco, Mexico silver. You want to look for marks like 925. I've done a few episodes on how to identify real silver, and also TA or Taxco hallmarks. A lot of times the Taxco silver will have Taxco stamped on it somewhere, but not always. So you want to learn to recognize those hallmarks. Tiffany and Company, sterling silver, we all know about that, right? That's one of those brands that tends to be faked quite a bit. So you're going to have to do a little bit of homework and a little bit of research as it relates to Tiffany and Co. Elsa Peretti and Paloma Picasso, those are the collaborations that are highly sought after. Michael Dawkins, and then I think this is pronounced Bjorn Weckstrom. That's a Finland brand, and also Star Wars costume jewelry, which I didn't know about. So again, that's another brand, another designer I'm going to have to, study on, so that way when I see it, I recognize it. All right, so that is the sterling silver statement jewelry. Remember, we're focused on jewelry that's going to increase in value as the years progress, and we're also thinking about some of these designs and some of these pieces are no longer going to be made. So we really want to tap into that. There's a limited access or limited availability for some of these pieces. Now, as it relates to reselling the sterling silver statement pieces, you want to emphasize the weight. If you have some of these pieces and you're listing them, always include the weight of the piece. And if there are any signatures or stamps or anything, and if you can't make it out, at least put a photograph of the stamp in your listing. These types of pieces will tend to attract collectors. So, they'll know what it is when they see it, when they see the photos. And also, people who are looking to buy gifts will be looking for these types of pieces as well. And also, in my notes, I have that some of these pieces, there is scrap value. Now, I'm not trying to scrap any beautiful silver jewelry. However, there are buyers out there who will. So, you know, you really want to showcase the design of the piece or the history of the piece so you can ask more than what the scrap or the melt value is as it relates to silver. Okay. All right. So, number three on my list is unusual gemstones and semi precious stones. Now, again, gemstone jewelry has always been popular. Um, I don't know anybody who who doesn't like it. It's beautiful, it's rare, it's unique, it's very earthy, very grounding, and it tends to really draw in people who are looking for something with a natural look or a boho look, so to speak. All right, so why is this going up? Why are people looking for gemstone or semi precious stone jewelry? Well, younger buyers want affordable, unique pieces, over mainstream diamonds. Like some of these, younger jewelry buyers are not really looking for diamonds. They don't want diamonds like what their mom had or what their grandma had. They would prefer something a little bit more unique, but also something that they can afford and something that's not, a knockoff mass produced piece. All right, spiritual boho, like I talked about, especially the stones moonstone, labradorite, turquoise. Those types of pieces are definitely popular. I have quite a few spiritual, I guess, jewelry using these stones: labradorite, turquoise, moonstone. I absolutely love them. And I'm always looking. I'm not always buying, but I am always looking. If I found something that was totally my vibe, I probably would buy it. But I just know personally this is the type of jewelry I like and what I like to invest in. Now, the other thing, natural coral and jade are becoming rarer due to environmental restrictions. All right. So, and I know there's some things going on with coral where it's not as easy to get as it once was. And so the price of coral is definitely going to go up. So pay attention to that. All right, so what are we looking for as it relates to unusual gemstones and semi precious stones? Well, I've talked about a few of them already. Turquoise, Sleeping Beauty, Kingman Mines, Kingman, Arizona, I think is what that is about. Moonstone, vintage rings, Victorian and Art Deco styles, Labradorite, jade, I mentioned that, Chinese carved, I think it's pronounced nephrite and jadeite. Coral, branch coral necklaces, because now they're restricted as it relates to the environmental impact. So some types of coral are extremely rare and you just can't get them anymore. Garnet, amethyst, citrine, amber, onyx, malachite, and I think it's pronounced spinel and tourmaline. All right, so these are the types of gemstones you want to look for. And some of these jewelry pieces, they're so unique and they're so different. Even if the designer is using the same type of stone in the same type of necklace, because these gemstones are so different, you're going to have a very unique and sought after piece. All right, because it's not going to look like any other one, even like I said, when it's made by the same designer in the same type of style. So pay attention to unusual gemstones. And sometimes the weirder it looks, the more attractive it is, because again, it really emphasizes the uniqueness of the jewelry piece. So keep an eye out, right? And plus it's just fun. It's just fun to learn about gemstones and all of the things that go along with it. All right, so when you are thinking about keywords for the gemstones. You want to use natural gemstone, boho jewelry. I've talked about keywords in previous episodes. I also have a e-guide to help you with that. The best platforms for this type of jewelry usually is Etsy. As a matter of fact, that's where I bought all of my silver gemstone jewelry, because I just find that that's where I can get the most unique looking stuff at the best price. At least that's been my experience. And remember, buyers will pay extra for natural. So you want to emphasize that this is authentic, natural, from the earth gemstones. All right, so let's move on to number four of the jewelry that's going to be in demand and increase in value. It's the Brutalist Modernist jewelry. This is from the 1960s and the 1970s. All right, why is this type of jewelry going up? Well, niche collectors love raw, abstract, artsy, mid century designs. This type of jewelry is extremely limited. Now, there are reproductions out there, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about the actual, authentic, original stuff that was made in the 60s and 70s. So, there is a little bit of a scarcity element as it relates to this type of jewelry, again, which only helps it increase in value and increase in demand. Now, this is considered also wearable art, right? Some people like to decorate their homes in this brutalist or modernist style. And so, if someone has a passion for the way this looks, there is definitely that crossover of wearing this type of jewelry as an extension to someone's personal preference or personal taste. So, especially art collectors, they tend to recognize this jewelry right away, and they tend to be very passionate about it. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the list of the brutalist and modernist jewelry designs and designers that we want to pay attention to. Now, I have to admit, I did not know a lot of these names. As a matter of fact, I think I only knew one when I looked at this list of some of the most popular, most in demand, most sought after designs and styles. All right, so number one, Guy Vidal. This is a Canadian brutalist artist. Pal Kepenyes. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I apologize if I got it wrong. Bjorn Weckstrom. This is that Finland designer we talked about earlier. Robert Laren, Andrew Grima, Ed Levin, John Lewis, Stanley Hagler. All right, now I have heard of Stanley Hagler pieces. Oh man, they are so fascinating. All right, that chunky avant garde costume. It's got that crossover appeal. If you haven't seen Stanley Hagler jewelry pieces, I highly suggest that you look them up. Art Smith, Betty Cook, minimalist modernist. I want to research that. And any signed studio one off makers from the 60s and 70s era. Also, Hans Hansen, all right, a Danish silversmith who does modernist styles. All right, so these are some of the names of pieces, or I should say, designers and jewelry pieces that you want to keep an eye out for and that you may want to invest in now if you come across them. All right, because again, I think a lot of this stuff is going to get harder to find because they're just not making it anymore. Right. And people appreciate that, especially from the 60s and the 70s. That was a great time for jewelry. Okay. So, now, how do we want to list this or how do we want to describe this in our listings? Well, you're going to use the words modernist and brutalist, like I talked about. And the best buyers really for this type of jewelry are niche collectors, people who are looking for um, specifically this type of jewelry. And I think probably the best platform for that is going to be eBay, although Etsy is going to be great too, or maybe even some of the online auction sites if some people are interested in selling through an auction house or an estate sale company or something like that. The important thing to remember about this type of jewelry, if you are trying to sell it, is do not undersell and do not undervalue. All right. Sometimes the ugly hideous, weird looking pieces are the ones that can sell for the most money because they're so strange looking. And if you're someone like me who tends to kind of gravitate towards things that are weird, odd, creepy looking, I don't know why, but I'm always drawn to the energy of those types of pieces. Um, People like me, we will pay up for it, right? And I've done that where I've bought some hideous hideous looking jewelry, and then I've turned around and I've sold it, because there's people like me out there who are drawn to the strange, weird type of stuff. All right, so if it's something that actually turns you off, or something that you think is just so obnoxious, you may want to take a second look at it, because it could be something that is highly sought after. All right, so let's move on to our next type of jewelry that I believe will increase in value, increase in demand, and that's Y2K, early 2000s jewelry. Now, I know this doesn't even seem like it was that long ago, right? But when you look at the timeline, we're talking 25 years ago, 25 years ago. For people who are old like me, that doesn't seem that long ago, but for some of the younger generations, that was a long time ago. All right, so why is this type of jewelry going up? Well, it's because of TikTok trends and the revival of certain types of fashions and styles. You know how once something kind of catches on in social media, it takes off, it creates a big demand, not only for people who are collectors, but also these younger generation jewelry buyers who want to get original pieces, like from when maybe their parents had, or from, maybe some of their favorite celebrities or music artists or whatever wore back in the day, probably before they were even born. All right. So this type of jewelry tends to attract Gen Z, driving Y2K nostalgia. Y2K fashion and trends have really grown in popularity in recent years, and I don't see that slowing down anytime soon. Also, there's trend cycles, right? Sometimes things always come back around. Those of us who have been around a while, we notice that, the things that were popular with our parents, with our grandparents, eventually just make their way back around as it relates to fashion, as it relates to style. All right. So the other thing that's interesting is that millennials now have disposable income, or the money to invest in this type of jewelry. All right. Just because we're talking about higher priced jewelry, don't rule out the millennials. A lot of them have money to spend as it relates to investing in these types of jewelry pieces. All right. So, um, and you know what else is interesting too is, like, a lot of us like to buy things that remind us of our youth. I know I like that. I love seeing things that bring back memories of when I was a kid, and I think that's going to just continue with all the generations eventually. So, what are we looking for as it relates to Y2K and the early 2000s jewelry? And I think a lot of these we already know, but let's go over the list. Juicy couture, juicy jewelry has always been hot. Ever since I've started reselling jewelry, juicy, Betsy Johnson, always, always, always that stuff sells. All right, we also got Tiffany and Co. We've talked about that. Return to Tiffany, that necklace with the like the little hang tag on it. Those are always popular. Abercrombie and Fitch. This was interesting. I really didn't know a whole lot about A&F jewelry, but I guess, yeah, if you've got some of those pieces, collectors are looking for them. Guess jewelry. Yes, I remember that. Also, which is not on this list, Victoria's Secret also had jewelry, and it came out during the time when the Juicy Couture jewelry was really popular. Because I have some of those Victoria's Secret, like angel wing jewelry pieces, and those are really popular too. All right, so we have limited two Claire's Y2K rhinestone chokers. Um, Believe it or not, Gen Z pays up for that. Back in the day, Claire's used to have much better quality jewelry than it has now. So if you have some of that old Claire's jewelry, I think you can probably make some money with it. All right, Dolce and Gabbana, Chanel costume, Y2K era. Tommy Hilfiger, yes, I remember that. Hot Topic, scene, emo jewelry, spikes, studs, chokers, and also fossil. Yes, fossil jewelry. As a matter of fact, I came into a lot of fossil jewelry about 2 years ago, and it was a bunch of brand new with tag stuff, and I couldn't, like, it sold very, very quickly. All right, so it may look like it's cheap now, but I'm telling you, it is very much nostalgia, nostalgia driven, and people are willing to pay the money. So make sure you're using keywords like Y2K, retro. You may even want to throw in TikTok trend, um, anything like that, that kind of draws in that millennial, that Gen Z crowd. The best buyers for this are going to be on probably Depop and Poshmark, maybe even Whatnot. And the thing that's interesting about these pieces is like they're pretty affordable right now. People aren't necessarily asking astronomical prices for these types of jewelry pieces. So you may be able to find these and hold on to them and watch as the price increases, as the demand increases. All right. Because, like I said, a lot of people are looking for jewelry that reminds them of their childhood. All right, so number six, signed designer jewelry outside of the big names. All right, collectors are priced out of Cartier and Tiffany. So a lot of people are looking for more of that mid tier luxury. All right, these names have really strong retail followings, and some of these retired pieces can definitely command good money. All right, so what are we talking about? We're talking about David Yurman, Judith Ripka, Lagos, John Hardy. And yes, there is some crossover. Some of these names are also on some of the other lists that we talked about earlier, which I think is good. So you know that these brands and these designers are definitely ones you want to pick up. Is it Ippolita? I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Marco Basigo, Roberto Coin, Michael Dawkins, Temple St. Clair, high quality gemstone jewelry. I think I've had one of those pieces before. Stephen Lagos, Stephen Dweck. I hope I'm saying that right. And then Paloma Picasso for Tiffany, the discontinued designs. Now, I remember reading an article about Paloma Picasso and how she collaborated with Tiffany. Those pieces are definitely highly sought after by collectors. All right. So these would be considered entry level luxury jewelry pieces. So, it's not going to be as much as the much higher end stuff, but it's not cheap stuff either. It's stuff where I would still consider this an investment piece because, like I said, I believe the value is just going to increase as the years go on, especially for retired styles and discontinued designs. All right. So, what do we want to focus on when we're reselling these pieces? The designer name. Okay, it's always going to be the name that sells these pieces. And if it is part of a collection, if you know that, you want to include that as well. And the best places to sell this type of jewelry, of course, is going to be eBay first, Poshmark probably coming in second, and then some of these sites like the Real Real, maybe Ruby Lane, maybe even First Dibs, depending on what it is. All right. So remember, these are like mid-tier luxury. This is definitely not cheap stuff. All right. And you don't want to list it as cheap stuff. Make sure that your pricing is um, not devaluing the piece in any way. All right. And so it's probably going, like, you're probably going to have to do a little research, a little homework on it if you do get some of these pieces. All right. So make sure you spend the time and investing the time on learning as much as you can. All right. So you can get a fair price and make a profit. Okay. So we are on. Number 7. Now, this one, which I thought was kind of interesting because I wouldn't have thought about it. But when I was doing research, this came up as something that people are looking for. And this is hearts, love motif, and symbolic jewelry. All right. So when I say symbolic jewelry, it's jewelry that is meaningful in some way to the person who is looking for it, to the person who is wearing it, to the person who is gifting it. Sentimental pieces always tend to have peaks as it relates to the demand, right? So we're talking about during the holidays, maybe during Valentine's Day and Christmas. People love that kind of stuff, the hearts to express their love or whatever. All right. So it's always popular. And the thing is, too, is like you really can't go wrong with this. I think when you don't know what to get somebody, these are the types of things that seem to work, and nobody complains about it. Like everybody likes hearts, everybody likes something that's meaningful. Now, this also includes zodiac and religious jewelry pieces. All right. And we're not talking about the cheap mass produced stuff, but things with zodiac signs have always been popular because I think it feels a little bit more personalized. And people like that. People like something that feels very personal and unique to them. And then same with the religious motifs, right? It's another way to yes, show your faith, but it's also, like I've said in past episodes, jewelry is another way of expressing your unique identity. And so that's why I think that these types of symbolic jewelry pieces are going to increase in demand. Now, remember, jewelry is a personal statement. So people, again, are looking for a way to express themselves because maybe they can't exactly dress how they want, but no one's really going to say a whole lot if you wear a certain kind of necklace, right? So it kind of gives you a little bit more freedom to kind of showcase who you are in a very subtle but noticeable way. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of these brands and designs. And a lot of these are repeats from some of the previous lists that I've talked about already. But that just goes to show you that, like I said, there is some crossover. And so when you see these designs and styles, grab them. Okay, so number 1, Tiffany and Co. Elsa Peretti open heart pieces. Oh yes, I've seen those. They're beautiful. James Avery, David Yurman, Juicy Couture, Monet and Trifari, vintage heart brooches. Yes, those are always in demand. I've had a few and I've sold them. Avon. Remember, not all Avon is good, but the vintage heart lockets seem to be popular, and some of the Avon brooches as well. Judith Jack, Marcasite, heart pieces. Thomas Sabo, zodiac pendants. Vintage Italian cornicello. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Horn pendants, those are good luck charms. Vintage Masonic and fraternal jewelry. Yes, secret society motifs. Um, I've seen some of those Freemason rings and some of those fraternity rings, from, I guess people like when they're in college, whatever. Those are really popular, especially some of the more popular fraternities. Now, I don't know a whole lot about it, but I do know that there are people who collect Masonic rings and the fraternity rings too. And then also key and lock jewelry, Y2K current revival. All right. Again, it has to be something that's substantial and not something that's just cheap and mass produced. You want something that is really good quality, maybe something that is vintage, in some way. All right. So anything symbolic and signed definitely is on the trend of steady growth, increasing in demand. So when you are listing these types of pieces, you want to, emphasize that it could be a perfect gift. And, zodiac jewelry, of course, personal personal jewelry, personal style, those types of words. And the interesting thing about these types of pieces is like you can actually increase or raise your prices depending on when you are trying to sell it. So if you're trying to sell it, let's say for Christmas or Mother's Day or Valentine's Day, you can probably raise your prices about 10 to 15% because of the timing. People are looking for gifts and they're looking for that type of jewelry specifically. All right, so don't be afraid to capitalize on timing as it relates to when you're selling your jewelry. All right, there's nothing wrong or shady about it. It's just that we are pricing our jewelry to meet the demand. Okay. Because we're not selling junk. We're not trying to, pass off something that's crap, as something that's, high value. We're not doing that. Okay. So we're just playing with the timing and playing with the demand as it relates to our pricing strategies. Okay. So that is what I got. That's what I got for you, jewelry friends. This was a really fun episode for me to research, and I'm really excited about learning some of these designers and some of these brands because, like I said, there was a lot I did not know, and so I need to educate myself. So when I find some of these designers and some of these pieces, I know to grab them, and I know that they are going to be worth something as the years go on and as we move forward. All right. So if you have any questions or if there is something that maybe I did not include that you think I should have, please don't hesitate to let me know. You can leave a comment on this video or you can leave a comment on Spotify. I do have comments turned on. And also, I would love it if you could share this video because I think that this is going to be helpful for a lot of us, not only jewelry resellers, but also people who just love jewelry, right? And maybe some of us are looking to invest in better pieces that could, be more in demand and more valuable. Maybe these are pieces we do want to pass on to our children, grandchildren, or whatever. All right. So, like I said, sometimes we have to think not only as entrepreneurs, but we have to think about the long-term investment and what is our long-term strategy. How long do we want to do this? Do we want to cultivate an inventory of highly unique pieces that are only going to be, like I said, worth more? Or maybe too, it might just kind of give us a little bit more of an edge because we're going to have these pieces and our inventory is going to look so different, from everybody else, all the other thousands of jewelry resellers out there. All right. So whatever we can do to stand out, to give ourselves an advantage, I'm all for that. And I really hope that what I shared with you in today's episode helps you do that. All right. So, like I said, that's going to be it, jewelry friends. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or observations, like I said, please share them with me in the comment section, or you can reach out to me via email. All you got to do is head on over to jewelryresellerspodcast.com and you can click on the contact tab, and that will give you my email. It will also give you a contact form if you would rather do that. All right. So I want to thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I will check in with you again really soon.